All right, so here's my first trade of the day. It was on Roku. Um, didn't get a good trade on it, but I definitely learned some stuff. Um, it's not my A plus trade. Um, well, not necessarily. I don't know if that's a good question actually, and I should know if it is or isn't. I feel like it was setting up for a potential A plus trade, and A plus by A plus trade I mean something that I really understand and can explain, and show previous examples of, etc. Um, which it was sort of setting up for a range resistance slash sell the news, which I would say the sell the news I'm not necessarily an expert in, or would say I'm an A plus in selling the news types of um, catalysts, even though it's not necessarily what the catalyst is all the time. It's about the R-ball and then technical analysis, but I've been sort of getting on this idea where the higher time frame selling off stocks sell the rips, right? And a lot of times they'll have these random catalyst news where they get a pop and they fade, or sometimes they get a pop for multiple days or weeks. I mean, like Baba, had turned around, made a lower high on the daily, and then eventually broke up, had some good swing longs, and then eventually hit a big resistance and then continued down. So I thought that maybe I was at a resistance level here today for that fade right away, but maybe it'll come a little later. But that's where the news comes into play a little bit too, because for Roku, I mean, the news that came out, and you can see here that the news came out right at 9 a.m. So about a half hour before the open. You can see all this volume here at about 25,000 per minute. So that's pretty good for the open. It had, over 700% R-vol during the day, almost all day. So a lot of eyes looking at it. So basically, the news on it was that it agreed to a multi-year extension with YouTube and YouTube TV, but it was more of a it was an extension. So they already had an agreement, then they extended it for another multi-year. So on one end, you're like, well, they're just extending it, so it was sort of maybe built into the valuation. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, well, a multi-year deal with YouTube, whether it's an extension or new, that's a pretty big deal, right? So I guess the news I wasn't fully sure of. Where like Twitter, this day, we had this selling off, so it sort of looks like Roku in terms of just clearly downtrending. Then on this day in the pre-market, popped all the way up and then sold off all day. And that news was, I think that news was just the CEO was stepping down. So that's not necessarily linked directly to revenue, profits, etc. Even though, you could say, well, different CEO, or say it was a bad CEO for the company or a good CEO, etc., and that could have a indirect impact. But, the Roku was like a legit contract agreement, etc. But it was an extension. So I guess the term extension made me think, well, maybe it's just it was already built in. So, maybe it's like if this was already planned, say this was already planned months ago, people already knew about it, well, then it would be already built in. And so this kind of news would just be they just pump the news out as, oh, they actually signed it today. And so it's not like it's a change or a surprise. But that's where I'd say, well, I didn't really know that much about Roku and this agreement, and if it was or wasn't built in, and therefore I shouldn't go heavy or shouldn't trade it too hard if I really don't know that much about it, right? Especially if after trying to trade it for minutes or however long, the longer I trade it, the more it doesn't work out. And then I also know, well, I really didn't know that much about it. there's enough red flags there to be like, okay, start backing out. So there's a lot to learn from this. It's all about just tiptoeing in and out. The art of it, the risk management of it, getting heavy when it's working in your favor, backing out when it's not, and when it's not, that's where you just have to be okay with it. It's not working in your favor. Take your ego out of it, take your impatience out of it, and just back out of it. Because we know when we really see those A+ setups, and we can hit it hard. So to go back to Roku here. So yeah, we had that news at 9 a.m. and I was thinking it was a fade trade, especially because we had moved to ATR by the open. So you could say, okay, it was extended there. And then, well, actually I went long at the open here twice. So I guess I was initially thinking that the news was more substantial and that the longer it held up here, the more it was going to move up. So there's a couple things I saw multiple resistance levels. So, I mean, you had this big, up until today, you had this really high volume sell-off day, and then a couple wicks on this pullback, and then a range here. So I found multiple levels here, this 240 even dollar, and then the 245. So I felt like if it gets above 245, it's actually a change in character, change in news. It's a long type of, it's pretty strong news, but it wasn't getting above 245 here, right? So this was super small, but all of these were really small. And my intention was that this was going to accumulate. It had so much RVOL, 700%, that it couldn't make up its mind. It didn't need to just yet. It was going to just cycle through until eventually things cooled down, and then it was going to pick its direction. And I thought, if it holds up here, we might break above 245, and then this thing is legit for a breakout, and then I'll get my early entry and then add in. But it did some little fake breaks up to 245 and then got back under here. So I got short bias here thinking, okay, no, it wasn't that. These resistance levels held up. It's actually going to come back into previous ranges, and we're going to have that sort of fade. And then I told myself, well, it gets under here, I want to start getting in. I might partial here, but then under 232, if it gets under that, it really is a fade, and that's when I was going to hit it heavier. So I really didn't waste too much money on this. What I more wasted was just time. You can see here I wasted almost an hour waiting for this thing to go. So that was probably more what bugged me than anything. And I was sort of averaging in here, thinking that this was going to hold, and it didn't. Try one more time and then got out. And then here I actually tried a long because I'm like, okay, it's breaking 245, and you can see here that I was just a little bit impatient by that time. That to me is a trade that I take when I'm tired and impatient and have been worn out from this. But I do like what it did in terms of the higher time frame. I do like how it busted through, and then it almost filled this whole, I don't want to say it's a gap because it moved all throughout this day, but essentially this is kind of like a big gap because it's just this one day, and then you have this range here of more volume. So it did almost fill, got it it got up to 260, which is a nice whole dollar. And if you do the ATR here, it moved over an ATR after above 245. So I like that. And you can see here that it almost knew what it was doing right around here. You can see volume start to kick in, and then a pullback on low volume, and then it continued with even more volume. So it starts, you can usually tell when it starts a little bit early before the actual level's broken. So I do like overall in the bigger picture what it did. I think it could have done both. I think it could have made a good move down, or it could have made a good move up. And I kind of liked how I saw both ideas in my mind, but you know what? It sort of just fucked me over and tricked me a little bit, which is totally fine. Like those are the paper cuts that we take. But I do feel like it just really took a long time. And of course, around the time when I got out, you know, half hour later, it pretty much chose its direction and got in discovery mode, and you know, went up there pretty quickly. So yeah, I still like the idea of downturning stock, sell the rip, use whatever news to for volatility, find the higher time frame levels, and then get short when you can. And I do think it was a potential short there. And then I do think it's also a potential short here at 265, and then filling the gap here. I'm not sure if the gap are these wicks or if it's going to be the top here, but it's somewhere up here. So definitely this zone up here is going to be some kind of resistance. Whether it was good news or not today, it's going to have some trouble. It's going to have maybe some pullback. But that was a shit ton of volume, though, at the same time. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully Roku will be in play for a few days here and we can keep watching it. But yeah, it was definitely tricky today. If you change it to the 5-minute, yeah, just a lot of inside candles. So yeah, it's just a different moving stock, bigger spread. So there's a couple of factors in there that I'm not that good at trading. Something with a big spread, you need to be using more limit orders to really maximize your trades and your small share sizes and stuff. And then NIO, this was another trade that I just didn't commit to. This was another trade after me sort of being a little tired. I mean, I did take a break after Roku, but I did like NIO for a breakout. I mean, it is trending down, but you can see here that it's sort of hitting a bottom. I mean, this area here is somewhat of a bottom, and then it made multi-day inside days here. Sort of felt like this 34.50 was a level, and it had high R-vol and it only moved 40 to 50% of an ATR and had high R-vol and was giving you a nice high day break. So I think I probably should have just committed to this, but I was a bit worn out after Roku. But right here, at least what I can see here currently is this is definitely it could have gotten in somewhere in this direction for a high day break and hold with the bigger, higher time frame idea, and then once it did break that 34.50, which is an actual so this is a higher day break with the idea that it's about to break the daily level, and then here's the daily level. It does break, so somewhere in here you get in and you hold, saying that price won't get under that daily level. And then you use ATR, stuff like that. So this is something that I need to be taking no matter what, whether I'm worn out or not on Roku. I need to be taking these and making some money on them because they're just not that hard. So that's something I need to keep working on. But at the same time, I mean, this is a downtrending stock, a lot of volume selling down, so it wasn't necessarily an amazing breakout either. Here's IWM. I had some good trades on IWM, sort of scalped its intraday range here. I really like this level of 226.50. You can see here this white level, or this white line right there. So, generally these 2 days couldn't get past it. This is a lot of volume. And then up above here is a gap. So you have a gap plus you have these 2 days sort of aligning. So you have a nice zone up here, a nice selling pressure here. And it got up here today and then it came down. So I'm like, I just felt like today it needed a bunch more volume to get through there and fill the gap. And I just felt like today wasn't the day. So why not short it? Sort of a back to the VWAP type of short, standard deviation band, etc. So if we look here, make this a bit bigger. So yeah, this was sort of that line, that area was right here, pre-market high. So it aligned with pre-market high, and then we even got a sort of a head and shoulders. So we had sort of a trending up here, sort of a squeezing, and then it breaks up, and then it gets back under. So it makes a shoulder here. So I really liked it here. I sort of chased it here, got in, thought it was breaking right then and there because it did consolidate a little bit and then broke. So I got in and then got out of it and sort of fought it a bit. Got in again, and this time it was correct. The add-in worked. I didn't partial there, took off some, got it back in, added in, and then got out of a lot. So it really was just scalping in between here. I mean, look at this. This stayed in between 50 cents for about an hour almost. And got another scalp there, got out, and then got in really heavy here because I really liked this shoulder. So I got in really heavy here, made a lot here, partial there, had more orders set. I actually had to leave, so but I would have gotten out of most of it had I seen this in person, but I had orders set. But it did a sort of, okay, so earlier in the day, you can see here, a nice compression, higher lows, right? Similar top here, breaks it, retest, and then goes. So I really wasn't thinking, I was thinking it was going to have a hard time getting under this 225.50. So that's why I put a limit order right here. But I think I had one down at 225. But had I seen it did a sort of a double bottom underneath it, like it breaks the support and then gets back above it, I would have gotten all out right here. But I was away from it, so I came back to my desk, saw it, came back up here, added in, and then made some more here. So I got a bunch of good scalps and trades on here. I don't mind doing this as long as I have energy and I'm patient and I get out when it doesn't work, stuff like that. I can totally do this. But yeah. So yeah, I really liked that higher time frame zone level up here, and was sort of playing the, the reversal or the back to VWAP, which it really didn't go back too much. I mean, this was, all the markets were just super strong and holding up. That's right. So I got one more trade on SPY, I forgot. So what the SPY did today was, I wasn't really going to trade it, but I liked the, sort of ugly, but we had a clear bottom that it was creating, gets below it again. So really it does a nice head and shoulders here, kind of ugly, like I said, but this was sort of a failed breakdown. And all the way back to VWAP, then all the way back down. Like I said, really ugly, lots of wicks and stuff, but I just felt like, this zone was going to hold. This was a failed breakdown, got in, held the VWAP. I got out so heavy here. I just did not think it was going to keep going. So I held a small position, and for some reason I just felt like it was just going to turn back around, but it didn't. And that's why you got to hold on to these suckers. I mean, I guess it would have stopped me out, but I do like how it still held this zone, and then got back above this. Maybe it could have gone long there again. I mean, like I did with IWM, I could have just held it and just got in again, sold up here, it held it, added in, and held for this move up. Really just playing this intraday action, this failed breakdown. It's almost like once you get this failed breakdown, even though it's a shitty day and a range day, I mean, we like to trade the ranges, right? And those sometimes show up in slightly different ways. So it's like we had this range for almost 2 hours, and it breaks it, right? Okay, let's see what happens. New volume, maybe, gets back above. Then you have sort of a trade to take, because now you have a good level and a good kind of trade from here to VWAP or here to the other end, right? Sort of that standard deviation. But other than that, in here, there's no way you're going to take this trade. I mean, unless you knew there was a level up here. I mean, this is just crazy. Look at these wicks and engulfing candles. This is all algos and stuff. So I think this was the best entry here or here, and then maybe even holding above VWAP. But once this happened, it sort of became in play, I think. So once you get this failed breakdown, it's just like a trend line break or compression. Once the break happens, a lot of times the stock gets cleaner. Maybe more retail traders get involved, etc., and it gets a bit more playable. And that's what I think happened here, even though it was a shitty day, and it was a compression day, and we really didn't move much. Yeah, we moved about $3, and its ATR normally the ATR has been $8, and today it only moved $3. So that's all I got for now, I guess. Thanks.